Hello everyone, this is Group 5. In today's presentation, we'll be introducing a theory explaining white-collar criminality. We'll then look into the case study we have prepared and hopefully it will be useful to help you understand how this theory translates into real life. So, what exactly is a white-collar crime? Is it simply crimes where there's a lot of money involved? So the way Sutherland defined it is that they are crimes committed by people in positions of respect, power, or high status in the course of his or her occupation. So this includes commercial crimes as well as political crimes, and some might even consider cybercrime to fall within this category. This is all in contrast to what we would term as street crime. Previous studies would associate crime rates with poverty levels or your socio-economic status. But what Sutherland believed was that this was simply based on biased data and was not true, and that people can develop criminal behavior regardless of their positions in society. To do that, he came up with what he termed as the differential association theory, which he first developed in 1939 and continued to further revise it over the years. So, what does the differential association theory say? This theory suggests that people develop criminal behavior from the frequency and intimacy of their association with others who practice the behavior. And if you do not mix around with people who are more law-abiding, you are naturally more likely to end up normalizing this criminal behavior. So, for a simple illustration, suppose you have two people and don't really know much about them, except that you know who in a society they have strong interactions and ties with, and we represent the different groups in the red and blue circles. In this case here, the person on the left has stronger ties with the ones colored red, while the opposite is true for the person on the right. Which means that over time, they will each learn and normalize the values and attitudes of those whom they are close to or whom they frequently interact with. They begin to have a different view of the behavior that they learn from their circle. Whether these might be thinking that the act of downloading pirated movies is normal, or that it's okay to cheat as long as no one gets physically hurt, or even consuming drugs for the pleasure of oneself. And this behavior of criminality is something that is learned through your association with others across all strata of society. And one consideration is that you can normalize values through media or pop culture like movies or music celebrities. And it is not simply the byproduct of your social class or poverty.
Now, we'll look into how the differential association theory plays out in an actual case study, something which most of you might have heard of before, the Panama Papers. It's a scandal that came to light in 2016, involving many of the rich, famous, and powerful across the world. So what exactly happened in this scandal? It's essentially a global investigation carried out by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists on the law firm called Mossack Fonseca. They have offices all over the world and are headquartered in Panama, where the legal structure there makes it a tax haven. The leak basically shed light on how the rich have used offshore companies to anonymously hide their assets, perform illegal transactions. But just to be clear, offshore companies are often used for legal purposes. Some famous people named within the papers include Jackie Chan and also Emma Watson, who reportedly, for privacy reasons, used offshore companies to purchase property. In total, there was about 2.76 terabytes worth of data and 11.5 million files. The whistleblower who leaked this data went by the name of John Doe, and to this day, we do not actually know the person's face, identity, or even gender. This is a quote from Bernie Madoff taken from a chat with a journalist while he's in prison. If the name's familiar, Madoff is actually the mastermind behind history's biggest Ponzi scheme of about $65 billion, which fell apart during the 2008 financial crisis. If you're interested, you can catch out the Netflix movie Wizard of Lies. So here Madoff goes to the heart of the issue, which is that he does not even see this as something illegal, as long as you find the right loopholes. I mean, sure, shell companies are in itself legal, but what he describes here is at best shady. And in fact, a lot of these companies are structured and layered in a way that makes the activities being conducted unclear and the tracking of money quite difficult. One of the many powerful families named in the Panama Papers is the family ruling Azerbaijan, It's a country somewhere near Iran in between Asia and Europe. And what is shown here is how the family network is represented through these connections to offshore companies, which they've used to amass their wealth. In one particular case, the president used a state-owned company to bail out mining companies, some of which are owned by other family members themselves. So there's no clear effort to distinguish what belongs to the family and what belongs to the state. This is another section of the network, and it's more clear here how the setup can involve multiple layers of companies to make it hard to track where the money goes and to hide the identities of the company owners. So touching back on the theory, when we consider how the president along with his wife, sister, children are all involved in this entire scheme, you can see how their criminal behavior is something that's learned and normalized among the family. Whereas from where we stand, especially in a country where strict anti-corruption laws are enforced in Singapore, it's clearly something that you wouldn't consider legal. And to further show you the extent in which these behaviors are learned from those around you, you could actually attend events where these activities are brazenly discussed. They even had presentations where tax evasion is basically rebranded as asset protection. From the presentation outline here, it's very clear what the firm does for their clients, and it's shown in a way that if everyone's doing it and have been doing it for a long time, then it's fine for you as well. Your perspective on the issue will eventually change and you convince yourself that it is okay.
In our research, we realized that the differential association theory can explain well how people within a society pick up and develop criminal behavior. But we're not sure if it directly addresses the internal motivations behind why certain criminal acts are carried out. In the theory, as you pick up criminal behavior through frequent association with those who practice the act, your perception of the act changes. Over time, you will learn how these criminal acts are carried out, and you end up justifying the act for yourself. So in the case of tax havens, you might choose to carry out the act because you eventually don't even think that it is wrong, since it is your own money anyway, and that no one gets harmed just because you choose to hide your assets elsewhere. On the other hand, we have the classical perspective on deviance, which would instead argue that people commit crimes having weighed its costs and benefits, which means you commit a crime because it benefits your position. And the punishments implemented by the law, should you get caught, is not high enough. You could easily call for a bail, or that you are unlikely to get caught or penalized anyway. And actually, we can see how this plays out in the case of tax evasion. You only have to pay the law firm a small fee to hide your wealth, and it can save you maybe millions of dollars over the years, where it is difficult for you to be caught. There's really very little repercussions that might deter people from doing what they did. And really, when you look at how the scandal is played out, a lot of those who have been named in the papers are powerful people who do not get convicted for what they've been doing. In fact, Khadija Ismailova, a journalist investigating the Azerbaijan family, was imprisoned by the Azeri government. Another Panama Paper journalist, Daphne Caruana, received death threats and ended up being killed in a car bomb in Malta. The lawyers in Mossack Fonseca were convicted, but many of their clients who were complicit were not as affected. Comparing white-collar crime to street crime, the punishment towards white-collar crime is less severe. According to Mitchell's text, I quote, "An officer of a chain grocery store in 1 year embezzled $600,000, which was 6 times as much as the annual losses from 500 burglaries and robbers of the store in that chain." While white-collar crime does not incur physical harm like most street crime does, it produces social disorganization on a very large scale. While the public may not be affected by its consequences, the higher authorities sure knows what's up. Hence, is this a matter of reputation saving for the people in power or ignorance? Here are some questions to facilitate your group discussions. To what extent does this asymmetry exist? What about in Singapore? In light of the differential association theory, is it a good idea to confine criminals together in prison facilities? How far is Merton's strain theory sufficient in explaining why people from the upper strata of society commit white-collar crime? Thank you.